On April 3, 1983, Allison Weber was found deceased in her home at 5413 Westcott Street, Houston, Texas. The victim was a recent newlywed, married just 5 months prior to one Mr. Douglas Allen Travers, age 52, a man who, it was later determined, had attended Bel Air High School from 1951 to 1954, graduating in the same class as Cynthia Chapman, Allison's mother. Interviews with surviving family members and associates revealed a history of persistent conflict between mother and daughter surrounding Allison's engagement and subsequent marriage. Cynthia had vocally opposed the union on moral and emotional grounds, often describing Travers as manipulative and predatory. However, further inquiry unearthed that Cynthia and Travers had engaged in a romantic relationship during high school, which ended abruptly in their senior year. Cynthia instead married Harold Weber, an accountant 11 years her senior, in 1955. By the early 1980s, Cynthia was a widow living alone in suburban Houston. Her daughter, Allison, graduated with honors from the University of Texas and worked as a paralegal. In 1982, she began dating Douglas Travers, whom she met through a probate case involving his late sister's estate. The relationship advanced rapidly. Travers, then a real estate developer, proposed after 8 weeks. Despite vigorous protests from her mother, Allison accepted. The marriage ceremony took place on November 17, 1982. Psychological profile and motive development. Family counseling notes, obtained through subpoena from the Holcomb Therapy Clinic, revealed that Cynthia's objections went beyond typical maternal concerns. Cynthia repeatedly stated that Travers had stolen the life she should have had, and in private sessions disclosed ongoing dreams involving romantic reconciliation with him. Testimonies from Allison's college roommate and maid of honor, Lacey Sandoval, indicated that Cynthia's behavior escalated in the months after the wedding, frequent uninvited visits to the couple's residence, anonymous letters delivered to Allison alleging that Travers had a history of emotional abuse, no such history was verified, and phone calls at odd hours urging Allison to annul the marriage. Allison reportedly told close friends that she feared her mother was breaking down, but declined to pursue legal action or estrangement, citing a belief that her mother didn't have anyone else. Douglas Travers later testified that Cynthia was obsessed, and that he had once caught her snooping through his personal mail. Event precursor. Records confirm that Cynthia Weber purchased an unregistered .38 caliber revolver from a pawn shop on March 17, 1983. The transaction was completed under the pseudonym Linda Thomas. Investigators traced the weapon through fingerprint analysis on the sales receipt. On March 28, Cynthia was seen arguing with Allison outside the latter's office at a downtown law firm. The firm's receptionist, Martha Jenkins, stated under affidavit that Cynthia grabbed Allison's wrist and accused her of ruining everything. No police report was filed. On April 2, 1983, Allison attended a charity luncheon alone. Her husband was in Austin on business. Witnesses at the event said she appeared distracted and left early, telling a friend she had a family matter to resolve. She was not seen alive again. At approximately 7:22 hours, Cynthia Weber was captured on a neighboring security camera, Bel Air Grocery, corner of Westcott and Blossom, purchasing a pack of latex gloves, 2 rolls of duct tape, and a box of kitchen garbage bags. She drove a 1978 Chrysler New Yorker, Burgundy, Texas plate 4BZ, 762. Phone records confirm she made a call to Allison's home line at 8:03 hours. According to the Southwestern Bell timestamp, the call lasted 43 seconds. The call was answered, assumed to be Allison, home alone, as her husband was still in Austin. Cynthia arrived at the residence between 8:15 and 8:25. A neighbor, Mrs. Arlene Hager, later stated under affidavit that she saw Cynthia's large red car parked in front of the Weber Travers home shortly after 8:20. She assumed it was a routine visit. Scene findings and forensic analysis. Allison's body was discovered at 19:47 hours by her husband, Douglas Travers, upon his return from Austin. She was found lying face up on the living room carpet, a single gunshot wound to the left temple, contact range, stippling consistent with close proximity discharge. A pillow from the adjacent sofa bore a circular powder burn, used as a makeshift suppressor. She was clothed in blue jeans and a white cotton blouse. There were signs of a struggle: overturned end table, a broken vase, and superficial abrasions on Allison's left forearm. Her fingernails were chipped, and post-mortem analysis recovered 3 brown synthetic fibers inconsistent with her clothing, later matched to the lining of Cynthia's driving gloves, recovered from her home. The revolver was not present at the scene. Cynthia's actions post-homicide. Surveillance footage from the same Bel Air grocery, timestamped 9:36 hours, shows Cynthia returning to the location and discarding a white plastic bag into the rear dumpster. Crime scene technicians retrieved the bag on April 4. It contained bloodied paper towels, an empty latex glove box, and a spent .38 shell casing. No direct witnesses observed her leaving the Weber Travers home, but a traffic citation issued at 10:12 a.m. by Officer Raymond Shaw shows Cynthia's vehicle clocked at 42 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone on Memorial Drive, heading northbound, approximately 1.7 miles from the murder site. Attempted concealment. Cynthia attempted to create a narrative of natural causes. During the initial investigation, she informed officers, voluntarily arriving at the home around 20:40 hours, that Allison had suffered migraines for years, and speculated that maybe it was an aneurysm. She claimed not to have seen Allison in over a week. Her demeanor was noted as calm, even relieved, by Officer Dean Salazar, who also reported that Cynthia did not ask to view the body or inquire about funeral arrangements. Forensic inconsistency arose almost immediately. Blood spatter trajectories, the presence of gunshot residue, and the positioning of the body indicated a staged scene. Allison's hand had been placed beside the wound, mimicking a suicide, but the absence of powder burns on her hands and the lack of weapon contradicted this. Key forensic discovery. On April 5, Houston police received an anonymous tip, later linked to Cynthia's sister-in-law, Marlene Griggs, indicating that Cynthia had recently requested help disposing of a metal item, and had been seen burning papers in her backyard. Subsequent search warrant executed April 6 led to the recovery of the murder weapon, hidden in a planter box on Cynthia's back porch. Ballistics matched the .38 round extracted from Allison's skull. Her fingerprints were not on the weapon. Cynthia's were. Lead Detective William V. Harper and Sergeant Lisa Domingo of the Homicide Division assumed control of the investigation on April 4, 1983. Initial findings, including trajectory analysis and powder residue distribution, prompted immediate classification of Allison Weber's death as a suspected homicide, not a suicide. Autopsy and Toxicology Report, Harris County ME Ref, 83-441. Cause of death, gunshot wound to the head, entrance at left temple, exit incomplete due to bone fragmentation. Manner of death, homicide. Toxicology, negative for alcohol or narcotics. Notably, defensive wounds were present on the victim's left hand, abrasions consistent with grabbing or resisting. No ligature marks or signs of prior restraint. Cynthia's posture and contradictions. Involuntary questioning on April 4, Cynthia stated she had last seen her daughter early March, but several witness statements, including the grocery clerk, Ms. Norma Pyle, and neighbor Arlene Hager, placed her at Allison's home on the day of the murder. Cynthia claimed ignorance of any firearm ownership, though her late husband Harold's records indicated a missing .38 revolver, formerly kept in a locked basement cabinet. When asked about her relationship with Travers, Cynthia grew evasive, labeling him a parasite and denying any prior romantic history. This was directly contradicted by a yearbook photo submitted by a former classmate, Marjorie Denton, which showed Cynthia and Douglas Travers together at the 1954 winter formal. Behavioral indicators. Investigators noted Cynthia's lack of emotional response. She made no inquiries about funeral planning and, within 48 hours, was reported by Travers to have dropped by his home unannounced with a casserole and an offer to talk through things. Travers provided a sworn affidavit describing Cynthia's demeanor as uncomfortably warm, claiming she said, "Now there's nothing standing in our way." The statement was given to detectives on April 6. Search warrant execution and breakthrough. A warrant was granted the same day. During the search of Cynthia's residence, officers recovered one pair of lined brown leather gloves, fibers matching those found under Allison's nails. Torn notebook pages containing fragmented sentences, "She doesn't love him the way I did," and "If only she hadn't." The murder weapon, located in a planter box, previously washed but still bearing serial number traces and a single latent fingerprint matching Cynthia's right index finger. Cynthia was detained for formal questioning on April 7. She declined legal representation initially but became uncooperative after being informed of the fingerprint evidence. Cynthia Louise Weber was arrested without incident on April 10, 1983, at 11:34 hours at her residence. Officers Harper and Domingo executed the warrant. Cynthia, wearing a pressed blouse and skirt, opened the door calmly. She asked, "Is this about Allison?" and made no verbal protest when advised of her Miranda rights. Booking at the Harris County Jail was completed by 13:05 hours. Cynthia was charged with first-degree murder under Texas Penal Code Section 19.02. Bail was denied pending arraignment due to the premeditated nature of the offense and risk of witness interference. Initial statements and demeanor. During post-arrest processing, Cynthia maintained a composed exterior. When placed in holding, she asked for a hairbrush and a copy of Lady's Home Journal. She made no attempt to contact legal counsel or family. Her first interview under custody, conducted April 11 by Sergeant Domingo, yielded minimal cooperation. Cynthia denied involvement, offered no alibi for the morning of April 3, and suggested the scene had been tampered with. She deflected when asked about the revolver. "If it's mine, someone must have taken it." She did not express sorrow or mention her daughter by name. When asked directly, "Do you feel responsible for Allison's death?" she responded, "I did everything I could to save her from that man." Public and media response. News of the arrest, reported by the Houston Chronicle on April 12, drew wide attention. The headline read, "Mother charged in daughter's killing, jealousy alleged in shocking case." Public sentiment turned sharply. Letters to the editor described the act as domestic betrayal of the highest order. Former neighbors of Cynthia described her as controlled, elegant, but strange around younger women. Allison's funeral was held April 14 at St. Luke's Methodist Church. Cynthia did not attend. Douglas Travers, visibly shaken, issued a brief statement to press outside. "My wife was taken by someone who should have protected her. That's all I can say." Jail conduct and monitoring. Cynthia was placed in administrative segregation for her safety following verbal confrontations with other inmates. She remained solitary by choice, refused psychiatric evaluation, and kept a strict routine, early rising, long showers, and handwritten journaling in her cell. Her only visitor during this period was her church pastor, Reverend George Milton, who reported she spoke with a peace that didn't match the gravity of her acts. On May 2, 1983, a Harris County grand jury indicted Cynthia Louise Weber on one count of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, namely, premeditation, familial relationship, and deliberate concealment of evidence. Lead prosecutor assigned was ADA Carol Finch, known for her prosecutorial work on domestic homicide cases. Cynthia's court-appointed defense attorney was Malcolm Pryor, a senior public defender with extensive experience in mental health defenses. Pretrial motions and strategy. Defense counsel filed motions to suppress physical evidence recovered from Cynthia's residence, citing alleged procedural irregularities in the execution of the April 6 search warrant. Judge Elliot Harlan denied the motion on May 15, affirming probable cause and proper warrant execution. On June 3, Pryor notified the court of intent to pursue a diminished capacity defense, citing emotional destabilization stemming from unresolved grief and abandonment trauma. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered. Dr. Emery Lundgren of the State Forensic Unit found Cynthia mentally competent to stand trial, but diagnosed obsessive love disorder with narcissistic features. His report emphasized a pattern of intense fixation on perceived romantic ownership. Trial commencement. Jury selection began July 5, 1983. Of the 87 potential jurors interviewed, 12 were seated, 7 women, 5 men. Opening statements were delivered July 8 at the Harris County Courthouse. Prosecution presented a clear narrative. Cynthia Weber, driven by obsessive jealousy and unresolved romantic attachment to Douglas Travers, methodically planned and executed the murder of her daughter Allison to eliminate a perceived rival. Finch emphasized Cynthia's calculated steps, procurement of gloves, use of a silencer pillow, post-crime cover-up, and immediate insertion into her daughter's widower's life. Key evidence presented included forensic ballistics tying the .38 revolver to the fatal wound. Cynthia's fingerprints on the murder weapon. Testimony from Travers recounting Cynthia's post-murder behavior, including the unsolicited visit and suggestive remarks. Statements from grocery and neighborhood witnesses placing Cynthia at the scene on the day of the crime. Handwritten notes recovered from Cynthia's home referencing jealousy, loss, and romantic resentment. Defense argument. Pryor's defense centered on Cynthia's mental state. He framed her as a widowed woman, discarded and destabilized by the return of a painful ghost from her youth. He admitted she may have been present, but suggested an emotional breakdown, not intent, had guided her actions. The defense did not contest the presence of Cynthia's fingerprints on the weapon but questioned the validity of witness recollections and argued that the prosecution had not definitively proven the act was premeditated. Witness reactions and courtroom conduct. Throughout testimony, Cynthia remained composed, rarely displaying visible emotion. She declined to take the stand in her own defense. Court observers noted her tendency to glance at Travers when he entered the courtroom. Travers did not return her gaze. On July 25, closing arguments were delivered. ADA Finch concluded with, "This was not an accident of grief. This was a murder born of envy, the oldest and most poisonous of motives." After final instructions from Judge Harlan, the jury retired at 13:18 hours on July 29, 1983. Deliberations lasted 6 hours and 42 minutes. Jurors requested re-review of the forensic timeline and written excerpts from Dr. Lundgren's psychiatric report. At 20:03 hours, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. No recommendation for leniency. Verdict was unanimous, 12-0. Courtroom reaction. There was no audible response from Cynthia Weber. She stood motionless as the verdict was read. Observers noted her eyes fixed straight ahead, her hands clasped in front of her. When led from the courtroom, she paused briefly and appeared to glance at Douglas Travers, who remained seated, expression neutral. Outside the courthouse, ADA Carol Finch addressed the media. This case was about control disguised as concern. Cynthia Weber believed love gave her ownership. The jury saw through that. Victim impact and sentencing hearing. On August 2, 1983, a sentencing hearing was convened. Douglas Travers delivered a brief, written statement read by the prosecutor. "Allison was my wife, not her mother's possession. Cynthia Weber killed the only person I've ever truly loved." Lacey Sandoval, Allison's close friend, testified emotionally, describing the victim as bright, loyal, and capable of compassion even to her own detriment. Judge Harlan imposed the maximum sentence permitted under Texas law at the time. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole for 40 calendar years. In his remarks, Harlan stated, "Parental love is not a defense when it mutates into possessiveness so warped it extinguishes the very life it claims to cherish." Public and institutional response. The case drew significant regional attention. Op-eds in the Houston Chronicle and Dallas Morning News debated the responsibilities of family in respecting adult autonomy. Advocacy groups for domestic violence survivors referenced the case as a rare but powerful example of psychological abuse escalating to fatality. Cynthia was transferred on August 5 to the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She entered the general population but was kept under behavioral watch due to concerns about self-harm, which ultimately proved unfounded. Cynthia Louise Weber was processed into the Texas Department of Corrections on August 6, 1983, inmate #TX772416. She was assigned to the general population at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville. Her initial classification deemed her low flight risk, moderate behavioral concern due to the high-profile nature of her conviction and psychological profile. For the first 18 months, she maintained rigid isolation, declining group activity, vocational training, or religious services. Psychological evaluations noted persistent narcissistic traits but no active signs of psychosis or suicidality. In 1985, she began working in the prison library. Staff described her as orderly, emotionless, and unnervingly calm. She continued journaling daily, and her cell walls remained bare except for a single framed photo, Allison, age 6, in a ballet costume. Correspondence and contacts. Cynthia received no visitors after 1986. Her correspondence was limited to a yearly Christmas card to her former pastor and occasional letters to a cousin in Beaumont, which contained no mention of the crime or her daughter. She never appealed her conviction. Douglas Travers remarried in 1987 and moved out of state. He declined all interview requests related to the case. Final years and death. Cynthia Weber died on March 14, 1994, of acute myocardial infarction at the Gatesville Unit Infirmary. She was 58. Her remains were unclaimed by family and interred in the state prison cemetery, marked with a brass plaque labeled only CLW 772416. She left no will or written statement. Her journal, totaling 17 volumes, was retained by prison authorities but never released publicly. A 1995 motion by a university researcher to access the journals for psychological study was denied by the Texas Attorney General's office, citing victim privacy. Legacy and classification. The Weber matricide remains a landmark case in intrafamilial homicide investigation in Texas. It was one of the earliest criminal proceedings in the state to apply romantic obsession as a prosecutorial motive in a parent-child relationship. The Texas Council on Family Harm Prevention referenced the case in 1996 in its white paper on covert parental emotional abuse, urging mental health professionals to take expressions of parental possessiveness seriously when combined with histories of romantic fixation. Though rarely cited in broader media since the early 1990s, the case continues to appear in academic discussions on abnormal grief processing and pathological jealousy. Case status. Closed. Conviction secured. Motive, obsessive jealousy/retroactive romantic fixation. Modus operandi, targeted shooting/staged suicide.